own up to it, whatever your values, however you want to express your values in there, but create a framework for it, because other people have different lived experiences, they have different educational backgrounds, and so creating a framework about how to make those decisions is important.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Eric Williams is the founder of Willity, a company dedicated to helping leaders and entrepreneurs streamline their business operations, improve leadership skills, and enhance personal effectiveness. With over 20 years of experience in leading teams, hiring, and managing over 1,000 employees, Eric has also advised more than 300 business leaders. His approach focuses on optimizing work schedules, developing leadership abilities, and refining individual strengths. He's passionate about creating significant positive impacts in the lives of his clients, promoting work-life balance, reducing stress, and improving overall business efficiency and compliance. You can learn a practical 4-step strategy from Eric to streamline your operations, reduce burnout, empower your teams, and focus on growth, ultimately leading to increased revenue and better work-life balance. So Eric, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Definitely looking forward to talking with you about this, Candy.
Well, before I get into questions on the topic, I would love for you just to share your story of how you became an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and so you could say in my blood. My journey, as with a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, sometimes it starts right away after college. Sometimes it's playing around with a few things, ideas here and there. Some work, some don't. A lot of things don't work. And so that's been my journey, has been through both career trajectories, helping support entrepreneurs and leaders as right-hand man, chief of staff, fractional COO type of positions as well. And so I've spent a lot of my career both supporting those visionary leaders and putting the operations in place in those businesses and those operations, and also building my own business around really helping entrepreneurs to streamline their operations, get their health and mental health back, and so that they can bring their gifts to the world in a better way. So it's been kind of to get back to the question, kind of a meandering journey of picking up different skills in different places, as a lot of us do, and bringing those all together in one place. And that's what I've been doing over the last 6-7 years, is really helping entrepreneurs in this space being able to streamline and systematize their business.
Well, in the bio that I read too, it says that you have a 4-step plan, to help entrepreneurs. So I would love for you to talk about what is that plan and how does it help entrepreneurs continue, growing their revenue, even if they're working less, and, kind of get out of all the firefighting that they might be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go step by step. The first one is to start with an assessment, taking a look at where the business is, what are the nuts and bolts that are going into this business. Almost no one comes to me, as I'm previewing a little bit farther down the path, but almost no one comes to me and says, I need to change the way I'm looking at my business, how I'm approaching the decision making, how my identity is impacting my ability to lead this business, right? So I'm jumping ahead a little bit. That's a preview of later on, a couple of steps down the road. But most of the time, it's the emergency firefighting that's taken over their life. And they are overworked, overwhelmed, not seeing their kids, maybe their relationships on the rocks. And these are symptoms of really just being burnt out in their business and not having a good handle on their business. And so the first thing to do is go in and figure out what's going on in the business. Basically, we're trying to stop the bleeding, to put it bluntly as an analogy. Stop the bleeding right away, go in there, do an analysis of what's going on, start to take apart the business. And then we use a process that I call structured deconstruction, where we basically take apart the business and give everything a job, whether that's through having it systematized and then delegated, whether there's some kind of automation tool technology that'll solve that problem, whether these things need to be in there at all. A lot of the time there's some legacy tasks and pieces of the puzzle that don't really need to be there anymore, and they might be sucking up 5-10 hours a week of someone's job. Sometimes it's quite a lot of stuff that's just kind of unnecessary, that's not driving results, that's not driving profit, that's just taking up time, and that when people are overworked and overwhelmed, they tend not to be good at evaluating what those things are. And so that's why we have to take this step back and do the analysis, and then we move into stage 2, which is structured deconstruction, take apart everything, put that back together, give everything a job, and start to rebuild those workflows. And this process, what we go through is to really give people the things they can do now, but also what they can put in place whether they need to level up their business, stage 2, stage 3. Sometimes that's driving additional revenue. Sometimes it's hiring a new staff person. That's going to take a little bit of time, but it's all about moving that direction. We also then look at the skill sets that person has, because sometimes there's those roadblocks in terms of their skill and ability to actually lead this business. They might be a really good individual contributor, essentially, where they know their stuff, they know how to get the work done, but they don't know how to lead their company. They don't know how to move into the leadership role. And then we also have to look at step 4 is looking at your leadership identity, the qualities that you want to bring to the table, what you need to delegate around yourself, what skills you need to bring to the table, and values you need to bring to the table, so that you can really level up where you need to be and where you want to go. Right? Because if you're fine running a solo business, that's fine. There's nothing against that. You don't have to grow just to grow. But if you want to grow, if you want to get out of this 60, 80, 100 hour a week work week, something's got to change. Either you got to scale it down or scale it up effectively so that you can step away from the day-to-day. But that requires shifting how you're making those hundreds of small decisions throughout the day. And that's why when I previewed that one first, because that's where the magic is we need to stop the bleeding, get things rebuilt in a way that's more effective in the business, get the nuts and bolts of the business working. But if you don't shift your identity, you're very likely to backslide into the habits and behaviors that created that mess in the first place. So that's why we always have to work on that. That's what some of the funnest things to do. Humans are the hardest machines to work on and the hardest things to get right, but it's the funnest. That's where you see the biggest transformations in entrepreneurs that I work with.
Well, I agree when you were talking about like leadership and things like that too. A lot of times people have never even learned those skills, because when they start a business, they were most of the time just themselves. There was, solo, and they don't know how to do that. And it's the same thing. Even many start a business not even knowing some of the basics of running a business in general, because they had a hobby, maybe it turned into a business, or out of necessity they started something. So I think there's so many things that entrepreneurs haven't had the chance to even learn yet, and leadership is definitely one of them. So that's one of the key points that you have in your 4 points. But a lot of times people just don't even know where to begin when it comes to that too. So, do you want to maybe touch on how they can even start to get educated on how to properly lead a team so that they are being effective with the staff that they have? Yeah,
absolutely. And one of the interesting things that happens almost every client that I've worked with, there's some point along the line there's a quote that I can pull out, or I could pull out, that's something along the lines of, I didn't know that I could delegate this. I always thought that this was something that I had to own, that I had to hold, that only I could do it. And that's where some of the biggest improvements and biggest gains can happen. And that's what requires some skill training. When we think about delegating, a lot of people just jump to, I'll just tell someone what to do and then they'll do it. And that usually doesn't work. And a lot of entrepreneurs that I talk to, that I work with, have been burned in the past. If you don't know how to do it, this is where, if you don't know how to delegate well, if you don't know how to manage and supervise people on your team well, recipe for disaster. Sometimes you are hiring someone and paying someone, and a lot of entrepreneurs feel like they need to go back and basically do the work over again. And what I find is that's where one of the biggest skill gaps is. And they get frustrated because they think that person's not a good worker. Sometimes that's true, but a lot of the times it's a matter of training, coaching that person into the role, being able to scope the work, being able to,
Hmm.
one of the other interesting things is being able to download that mental algorithm. All of the times when we're building a business, we're taking the sum total of our life experiences, our education, years of professional work in the field. We're using that in what feels like intuition to make decisions about what to do in our business and how to solve this problem because we are experts in solving this problem.
Hmm.
But then you delegate this task to someone else and they make a radically different decision than you. And sometimes a
Hmm.
very bad decision because they don't have this level of context. And so one of the things to do, as I trying to get this more into what you can do, it can be tough, and that's why we have a structured process to go through. But being able to recognize and understand that what feels like intuition, you can translate that into a form of an algorithm, an equation, however you want to think about a framework about how you make decisions, because it's not just about that decision, it's about the other decisions that you need to make, or you
Hmm.
need your team to be able to make a decision that's approximating how you would make that decision. Sometimes your team will make better decisions with a different framework, but at the end of the
Hmm.
day, you're building a business that has rules, that has process, to get us the consistent outcome out of that business, especially when you're not involved in every part of the decision. So you have to replicate that algorithm that's in your head. What are the pieces? What about my background and life experiences is informing how I address this response to a
Hmm.
client who's upset? How would I address that? How can I create
Hmm.
a rubric or a framework that I can teach someone else about, like, this size of client, this is the issue, go in and check to see if we actually did have a problem, that we didn't deliver what we said we were going to do. If that's the case, own up to it. Whatever your values, however you want to express your values in there, but create a framework for it, because other people have different lived experiences, they have different educational backgrounds, and so creating a framework about how to make those decisions is important, right? You don't have to
Hmm.
micromanage someone, but you do need to give them the values, the decision-making framework, the weights on different parts of the decision, so that you can help teach them how to make this. Eventually, it gets baked into the ethos of the business, but until that happens, you have to be more explicit about how you make
Hmm.
decisions, how you do that. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Right. Well, it's definitely important to share that too, because I think there are like the two sides. There's either one, oh, yeah, you can do this and this is what I need. And there's really not a lot of explanation and just expecting that they know what's in your head. And on the other side, where someone thinks, I don't think anyone could do this like I can, so I can't delegate it. Right. So there's the two
Yeah.
sides of those coins that people have to be able to realize someone can do it, but you do have to give them all of the supporting information so that they can be successful at making the decisions or doing the work or whatever it is that you're handing off to them. So I think that definitely was important to go over and share. But I would love for you also to talk about, like, what are the common reasons that entrepreneurs are struggling with burnout? Like, we know we work a lot. There's a lot of decisions that we have on our plate and everything too. But what do you see as kind of some of those reasons, and how can those employers or the business owners start to regain control over some of that to get an improved business and personal life?
Yeah, so there's a lot of the time early stage, and this is something I'm sure you come across all the time, is that there's some key tasks that business owners have to, when you're solo, when you're just getting started, you have to do everything yourself. There's an element
Hmm.
of hustle where you have to learn everything about the business, you have to do everything
Right.
yourself. And so I'm not saying that building a business isn't hard, but it sometimes doesn't have to be as hard as we make it. And that's
Hmm.
probably the key takeaway here is, sometimes we make it harder than it needs to be. We hold on to things longer than they need to be. We don't find those key experts that we can outsource and delegate to, like bookkeeping, like administrative supports, like picking out those key things that are just taking up time, but they're fairly straightforward. And so
Hmm.
when I work with entrepreneurs around what exactly to identify in their business, in their day to day, and I tend to work, even though I talk about it as business problems, it's really the entrepreneur's problems, the small business owner's
Hmm.
problems, the founder's problems. I always have to start with the founder and the CEO first, because we have to solve it for them before they can really free up their time to replicate this across their business. And usually, if it's a problem in the business, it's a problem at the top first. So we can't change the business without changing the ethos and the mindset and the structure of what the business owner is doing themselves. So
Well, I agree with that too. I've been doing this in my own company too, is telling my staff too that I want to make sure that the company can run without me, because you never know what could happen, and whether it's something that happens to me or if a family situation arises and, things need to be able to run. So we've actually been implementing this in our own company. But having the ability to hand that off and realize, like, I can be the bottleneck. If I don't get some of these things off my plate, right, then everything is waiting for me. And we don't want to be that way as business owners, right? We need to have things where we're not the bottleneck. And I'm sure you've seen that lots of times where it's really, like you say, at the top where the problems are, kind of starting or ending, right? The staff is willing to do what they need to do to help you, but you have to be able to let them, right? So how do they empower their staff to be able to handle these things, and they as the entrepreneur let go and give them the freedom to actually handle those things?
Yeah. And I think part of my answer goes back to what I was sharing about downloading that personal algorithm, the values, the framework, in terms of how to make decisions, how to go about this. It's about scoping a project well for someone else. When I talk about part of the structure deconstruction process about systematization, creating the standard operating procedures, the process, these things don't have to be that complicated. If I remember, I'll get back to a specific example about how to do it and how to implement it right away. But that is really a mirror, or an additional aspect of delegating. So these two pieces go together. You rarely can just delegate unless you have sometimes you have a superstar who can figure it out better than you can. But more often, if you don't give someone you're delegating a big project to, a whole job to, if you don't structure it well, that person can flail, and that's when you're having to step in, redo the work, not get those outcomes, and when you're doing this, one of the things about building a business like this, Candy, as you said, where you want the business to be able to run without you, is because you need to be solving other problems in the business. It's not that you're not busy. It's not that you're not solving problems. It's just that anything that can be done, if you can figure out the scalable, replicable process to get this done and have somebody else do it, get that off your plate, because you have other bigger fish to fry. You have other bigger problems to address. And it could be that as you're growing, you need to address those compliance issues that you might hit, or there might be other areas where you need to handle, when you level up as an employer, sometimes you hit certain thresholds where you need certain, additional insurance, or you need additional, coverage for something. And those are the types of things that as you grow, you can outsource part of it, but you need to be on those leading edge problems to be able to perhaps do it yourself the first time, figure out what the process is, what the system is, and then delegate it to somebody else, right? So a lot of the time as entrepreneurs, our job is to find those leading edge problems, to solve the big, hairy problems in the business, not just the day-to-day. So if you're stuck in the day-to-day, it's actually very risky for your business as well, because you don't have, you just imagine, a lot of listeners probably working 50, 60, 80, 100-hour work weeks, trying to keep their business afloat. And when you're on that edge, you don't have time to address the emergencies. Right, you're already stretched so thin that an emergency is just going to topple the whole business because there's no flexibility there. So that's the other risk. And to get back, I think, to the question, which was about how do you supervise your team? When we talk about those leading edge problems, when you're hiring someone new to your team, there's an investment that you need to make as the entrepreneur, as the founder, to be able to train that person up, make sure that systems are in place, especially for a new role or something where someone new is coming in. If you don't have the space in your schedule to be able to coach them and train them in terms of how this work needs to be done, then you're doing a disservice to them, but you're also not able to get it delegated effectively. And that's where it just creates, this vicious cycle of not training someone enough, not supporting them enough on the early end, not having the structures and systems in place in the business, which means that person gets frustrated. Then maybe they're only working at 50% capacity because they're frustrated and they don't have the support they need to actually do this. And if you're working so much that you don't have the awareness that this is going on too, then that person leaves, right? They may be only around for 3 months or 6 months. And so then you have to hire someone new and spend, block out another 10, 15 hours over the next few weeks to do interviews and hiring process, right? So it just creates a vicious cycle unless you're able to really, strategically invest your time.
Well, and you've talked a few times in the last few minutes too about those systems and processes and, being able to document that. And once again, someone might be thinking like, well, I'm so busy, I don't have the time, but what can you say to the entrepreneur to give them some tips on how they can do this efficiently, effectively, where yes, it might take a little bit more time up front, but if they do it properly, it is going to relieve their burden and give the employee like what they need to be able to do those tasks that are assigned.
Yeah. Candy, I'm glad you brought this question back. Remember, I said I wanted to talk about this again in a different, slightly different context in terms of how you systematize your business. A lot of the time people think that a standard operating procedure type of thing is just a big binder manual, right?
Right.
That's usually the visual people get. And you have to flip through to find the instructions for something. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Sometimes it's a matter, and because you can do kind of virtual multimedia type of trainings, there's a couple of things that I always recommend. So as a kind of a peek behind the scenes in terms of how these things get implemented. But one of them is simply just a train once model that I use, where if you are going to train someone, especially if you work in a virtual environment, but even if you don't, why not, when you're training a new employee, record that training that you're giving to them so that they can watch it multiple times if they need to. A lot of the time, people only absorb 20 or 30% of what they're listening to. And it's nobody's fault, right? No one's perfect. And so a lot of the times there's this mismatch in terms of expectations where, the entrepreneur, CEO says, well, I explained it to you already. It's like, well, you need to understand human psychology and human behavior. You've also spent a lot of time in this, and this person heard it once, and they had to take notes alongside, and then they're trying to translate from their memory and their notes. No, if you can find a way, for example, to record it, then that recording can live as a training that person can access. It can live as a training somebody else can access. It also is a way of codifying what that process is, right? So it doesn't have to be written, but there's also tools. Like there's a way to kind of additional layers that you can even just this simple thing. If you're going to train someone side by side, record it. This goes here. This goes here. Are we on this website? We enter this to do this. Follow that along. Download the transcript from that. Put it into AI. Say, can you write some standard operating procedures around how to do this? Can you summarize what was covered in this training, right? And then review it, right? You can have it in writing, you could have it in video form, and then you have a rich document about how this works. And Candy, if I were to ask you in 5 minutes to explain some fundamental part of your business, I bet you could do it even just now. If I just challenged you, just do it right now. Spend 5 minutes, tell me about this part of your business, right? I bet you can. You can do it from memory, and you don't even need a lot of prep. And so that's why I say I think people overcomplicate what the standard operating procedures can look like in a business, because it's really, if we're going to put it simply, it's about explaining how to do things and what the process is to get something done. And a lot of the time, a CEO can do that off the back, just without prompting, and explain it for 5 minutes. You take that into a transcript, you turn it into a written procedure, you have it recorded so that other people can access it that way. And so I just, we just wrote standard operating procedures for a key piece of your business in 5 minutes, or, an extra 5 minutes after that to throw it into an AI tool to summarize, right? So there's ways to not make this too complicated to do, but also it's a matter of priority. Which of these pieces need to be done? And that's why when I said the train once model, where you do it as you go. When you're bringing someone new on, you train them, you codify it, you put that into a database of information so that it's accessible, searchable, things like that. So that's in terms of some of the practical applications of how you can start to do this. That's why. But you also then need to figure out, well, so what's the order of importance for this? What are the most important things that I'm having to answer? What questions am I having to answer constantly? What areas of the business are the most messy that I need to clear up and create those processes around?
Mhm. Well, I agree with that too, because when we're doing our trainings as well, we are recording them because first, that's the easiest way to capture it. And then we do like to put into writing because people have different learning styles too. Some people can see it on a recording and will capture it, and some people want to go back through and like read step by step, so we do have a recording, and then we have like written out like step 1, step 2, step 3, often with screenshots too, so people can go back and see that too, and you don't have to necessarily watch the whole video. But I think, like you said, start with one thing, right, and then you can fine tune it and make it work for the different types of styles of people that are working with you, and you're capturing it, and it's helping them, right, to be able to be successful and do it successfully. So I think that's definitely important. I would love to just ask too, you talked earlier about like the identity of the leader, and they have to kind of change where they are thinking of themselves in terms of making this smooth transition, being able to delegate and things like that too. So can you maybe talk about what type of skill or mindset shifts that these entrepreneurs do need to make to be able to get out of running everything on a day-to-day basis to moving to that strategic decision-making position?
Yeah, and it's not something that happens overnight, moving from a doer to a leader. It's something that you step into and you take steps towards it. It's just that you don't want to get stuck in the doer. One of the biggest risks that I see for early entrepreneurs who are getting, once they get traction, is it starts to get overwhelming, right? They maybe land that first big client or have an influx of customers. Something that they did got them traction, which is exactly what they wanted. But then it becomes a busy day, a busy week, a busy month. Oh, it'll be better next month. But once you get to next month, then you're dealing with the emergencies because
Right.
you didn't get other stuff done that other month because you set it aside, right? And then it starts to create this vicious cycle where you're constantly just treading water, trying to stay afloat. But even just those small hiccups where you actually do get traction and do get customers and have to fulfill that, then you actually then it creates a ripple effect down the road, which some people don't ever get out of. I've definitely talked to entrepreneurs who this has been going on for months, if not years, where they're up at 6 a.m. working right away, working till midnight, 1, 2 a.m., hitting the bed, getting up, doing it again, and it's just been going on for months, if not years. And so the mindset shift to do this, and this is where people have to dig deep, right? If you want to get out of this, you have to make different decisions. And that's where the identity comes in, is that the identity that you brought into this wasn't wrong. There's nothing wrong with the identity when you're hustling to build your business, right? I don't want to make any part of this wrong. It's just that at some point in building your business, you need to show up differently. You need to make different decisions about how this business needs to run. It is about, and so that's where you have to dig deep, especially if you're in that mode where you're just keeping your head above water. Something needs to change. Sometimes I talked to somebody the other day who was rolling back their business. They actually cut their business, what they were provided, cut their customers down by 60%, just to give him breathing room to be able to figure this out. So sometimes you have to make those tough kind of decisions. So even if you're operating at $100,000 a month, you might have to cut it down to 50 so that you can create some breathing room so that you can figure out how to systematize your business to get back there and beyond. Because you just, especially if you get to that cap and can't get above it, something needs to change. So it doesn't always mean downgrading. It could just mean that you need to dig deep into what you may not feel like you have a lot more time. It's just that you need to do something differently. Right? So the identity shift is about not just delivering the outcome yourself. If that's how you want your business to run, that's fine. If it's not sustainable for you, need to make a different decision. It means creating the business is about creating a replicable process to get the outcome. That's where you can replicate your brilliance, what you brought to the business, where you got that early traction, your passion, your commitment, your dedication to the success of your clients and customers, your dedication to a quality outcome. All those values can come into play. But you shift into, how do I build a business that gets this outcome? How do I build a machine that gets this outcome? How do I build a process that gets this outcome? Instead of, how can I get this outcome for my clients and customers, right? So that's one of the bigger identity shifts, is how can I get what I want for my customers and my clients but it needs to be a process where I'm not involved, or I'm
Right.
limited in how I'm involved. What parts can I download up my brain? Where can I bring my education, my upbringing, my background into that value, the framework about how these decisions get made, how the process looks, what exactly needs to be part of this, what's the quality outcome that I'm providing at the end of this process. And so that's the part of the shift, is that fundamental piece then shifts how you make hundreds of small decisions throughout the day, right? Because that's why I say it's not as simple as that shift. It's about incorporating that shift into your identity, because if you're still saying, oh, well, I have to do the work myself, you very quickly get dragged into doing all the work yourself. Or if no one else, if you believe that no one else can do this but me, then you're not going to build a system or a machine that gets this outcome, right? These are just going to be fundamental pieces that you can't grow beyond. You can't build out of that. You have to shift how you're seeing the work, and what you're seeing is the value of what you're delivering. The value of you as the founder, as the CEO, is getting that outcome to more people. Getting whatever you're delivering, whether it's a product, service, getting that to people, making sure it's a quality outcome, making sure that it's delivered on time, all of those things, all the values you want to bring to the table. But the machine has to do it. And so you're looking for efficiencies in the machine to deliver that outcome. You're looking for a new hire that's going to add value to that outcome, or a piece of the machine that is not functioning as well. Maybe it's, needs to be fixed, needs to be repaired. That's where you might want to bring someone in to fix that part, the squeaky wheel part of the machine. And so that identity shift. And there's also sometimes entrepreneurs don't even think about what they want after this point too. Because I've definitely seen entrepreneurs self-sabotage around this point in their journey too. Is sometimes they really just want to be an individual contributor, and they just want a business that's just themselves, maybe an assistant or two, or something like that. And that's fine. If, as I said, sometimes they just want that.
Right.
They don't want to deal with the size and scale, and that's fine. But that's why it's important to figure out what identity you want to take into the future. Because if you do want a business where you're able to take a step back and have it run without you, what else are you going to do with your time? Or when you are working, what do you want to be working on? What is the thing that you're called to do the most in your business? Where are you able to add the most value to your business? And how do you want to be spending your time? Do you want your days to look like, getting into the office at 10 a.m. because you're able to go and get a morning workout in and have a leisurely arrival at work, and then you work for however long you want, and then you want to be able to pick up your kids after school? And so then if that's what you want, and if that's what you truly want, build your schedule around that, build the process of your business around that, so you are able to do what you need to do and pick up the slack, deal with the emergencies when they come up, right? But if you're not intentional about where you want to go, it's very easy. I had somebody I was talking to was basically sitting on their hands and just not doing anything in their business and letting it go, letting it run. He was able to had taken a step back, but it just wasn't what he wanted. Once he got to that point, it was the value, what he valued in life, there wasn't an alignment there. And so that's where the big problem was that his life he got what he wanted, but then he didn't know what to do with his life after that. Right. And so there's a lot of work to do here in terms of, that's why it's not really the answer depends on an individual and what they want, and doing some of that reflection about what they want their life to look like, what they want their schedule to look like. And then building basically the business systems game plan, and where the business needs to level up and change, so that they can follow that game plan to get where they want to go, and know that, and have that kind of mental and emotional anchoring around where they want to go, so that it aligns with who they want to be when they get there.
Right. Well, I know this has been an informative discussion, and we are coming to the end of the time that we have together. So I wanted to ask if you have an offer that you would like to extend, and how can our listeners contact you if they want more information?
Yeah, the best place is, I have a webinar a training that is about 25-30 minutes to do a deeper dive into a lot of these concepts, into exactly the 4 steps to go through to systematize and streamline your business, what that's going to take, where the biggest roadblocks and hurdles tend to be, and then that's where you can start to apply those in your business today. So that's at willity.com/watch. And that's actually the best place, because if you want to get on my calendar, if you want to talk, I always offer for people, this work is on my heart. Sometimes it makes sense to work with people. Sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't matter to me. I will talk to any business owner that wants help, wants to think through these challenges that they're having in their life, in their business, and make a game plan. So sometimes it makes sense to work together. Sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't matter. We'll get you on track and get you a game plan for what you need to do to move forward. So that's accessible at my website as well, at willity.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Eric, for being a guest on my show. I really appreciate your taking the time to chat with me on this topic.
Great. Thank you so much, Candy.
And to you, the listener, I hope you enjoyed this topic and you found it informative. And if you'd like to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.